Hello, it's Rachel back with the Shades of Orange. Today I'm here to review The Hungry Ones by Chris Sorensen. This is a book that I received from the author and it is the second book in the Messy Man series. If that series sounds familiar, that's because the first book is The Nightmare Room, which is one of my favorite books from last year, 2018. And so I was very eager to check out the newest book. It was one of my most anticipated releases for the year, and it certainly didn't disappoint. Now, because this is the second book in the series, I'm going to make this review spoiler-free for the entire series, meaning that even if you haven't read The Nightmare Room, you can continue watching without being spoiled for either book. However, in this case, I do think that you should go back to the beginning of the series and start with The Nightmare Room. Obviously, I loved it, so I do think it's worth your time, and you will get a lot more out of the second book if you read it all the way through publication order, because of the fact that there is a lot in the second book that is relying on information from the first. And if you plan on reading the whole series, you should know that The Hungry Ones will spoil major events from the first book. So needless to say, if you haven't started the series, start with The Nightmare Room. I've done a separate review on that. But if you're more interested in the second book, whether or not you have already started the series, continue on. I will be talking about the book and giving you my thoughts without giving away anything that you wouldn't know from the back of the book. So in terms of a synopsis, this is about a woman named Jessie who decides to buy a rundown motel where a bunch of people, 12 people in fact, were murdered years ago, and now the place has been abandoned. So she gets a great deal and goes about basically fulfilling her dream of creating this fantastic new motel that she is going to run. And of course, you know that it's not so simple anytime that a place has a dark history. You get that classic haunted house, or in this case, a haunted motel story happening, and the guests start to arrive, and within those guests, you get to see Peter and Hannah show up. Those, of course, are the main characters from the first book, The Nightmare Room, which is how the stories start to intertwine. And I don't want to give away more than that because it really is the kind of story where you want to go into it blind. And what I'll just say, which I've said before, is I do not like haunted houses or haunted building stories in general. So the fact that I'm now reading my second one by the same author and once again loving it says a lot. And I think that these books work because while they do still have the tropes of those classic haunted stories, they also bring in other supernatural elements which I really enjoy, and they're just very surprising. I don't want to say what's going on, but you know that there is someone or something that is this messy man. And the title of the second book gives away the fact that this book deals with something that has a huge hunger, and I love books that deal with that. They work so well for me. It's one of my favorite things to read in horror, and this book just brought in a lot of those elements that I really enjoy. So I know I'm being vague on purpose, but it's for a good reason. I will say that the author is an excellent writer. I think that his descriptions are vivid. I could always picture what was going on, and he has a really good pace to his stories. They build slowly with lots of good character development, and they tend to have really good finales. There's enough action to keep me engaged. And I think what happens so often with horror books, and I've heard other people say this as well, is that horror tends to have really bad endings. I'm not going to spoil anything, but I'll say that I personally am a huge fan of how all the books in the Messy Man series so far have ended. I just really like how he pulls it all together, and when so many authors, including really famous authors, tend to fall short in this area, I think that this one just does really good job. So something I really like is a book that isn't a letdown right at the end, which happens so often and is so frustrating. So I just really enjoyed this book. It's definitely a series I plan to continue on in the future. I believe there's going to be more books coming, and I definitely want to keep reading them. If you haven't picked up the series, again, I recommend starting back at the beginning with The Nightmare Room. But if you have read that one and are wondering if you should keep going with the series, the answer is absolutely yes. If I had to choose, I think I like The Nightmare Room a little bit more, but I tend to be someone who's really hard to please with sequels, and I pretty much always like the first book best when it comes to series, so keep that in mind. But a solid second book, and I just thoroughly enjoyed it. I flew through it in just a day because it was so much fun, and I would definitely recommend it. So those are my quick thoughts on The Hungry Ones by Chris Sorensen. I'd love to know down below if you've read this series. Please share your thoughts as long as you keep them spoiler free, or let me know if I've convinced you that you should pick up this series as well. I'd love to hear that. And thank you so much for watching. I will talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.